We are going to start. So, what is up, chat? How are you guys doing? So yeah, this is the Bird's Eye Competitive Apex Legends podcast, and just to talk about the purpose of this whole thing, essentially, it's just to provide a little bit more nuance than what's going on Twitter, because we all love the Bird app. You know, we all love speaking our mind, our thoughts, but there's not enough nuance on that website, naturally. So, what better place to talk about these very nuanced topics than on a podcast? So, for people who obviously don't know me, I'm a coach and analyst. I worked with GSD, NRG, and recently I'm looking for an org. So that's been fun. I did a little public coaching. But otherwise, I'm going to let these two gentlemen introduce themselves. Whoever wants to start can go ahead.
Take the floor, Jay.
Yeah, so my name is John Larson, gamertag Jaybiebs. I have been a day one Apex player. Probably got I think I'm at 3,000 plus hours now in the game. Mostly on console. I've kind of been dabbling more in PC. Like to think I play the game at a high level. It was Masters last split. I'm grinding towards Masters this split. I think I'm D2 right now. So that's kind of my experience as a gamer. I mean, I've always been playing FPS games mostly, going back to Black Ops 1 stuff. And then this is actually my first role in the world of game design and working with the development team. And my role in particular on the design team as well as the live team is just be concerned with all things balance and be a sort of representative as a high level player that can sort of take complaints and feedback from that level and communicate that into actionable design decisions. And the live side of that is mostly focusing on, as something is released, if it's immediately broken or extremely underpowered, I can kind of act quickly to make a change. So the most recent example would be with the heat shields. We introduced them, and one of the first things we removed, we introduced it strong and made it 2-stack, gave it fast heal, fast revive to encourage people to sort of use it as much as possible. But then once the takeover ended, one of the first things we did is just say, okay, let's take away fast heal and let it out in the wild and see what people do with it. So in addition to that, I am a part of all things balance discussions, both for legends and weapons, as well as stuff like loot. So I do have a say in all those things as
well. That was a fantastic introduction. I'm Hodsic. I've been competing in Apex since day one. Also played the game since day one, and currently am a sub/coach for Team Liquid. Mine's a lot shorter than yours.
Yeah, they already know you. They already know your face.
Okay, well, let's get started. So I think the first thing is, you kind of talked about this, but I was just going to ask, what is live bouncing entail? And also, can you talk about how that role fits into the whole, on a larger scale at Respawn?
Yeah, I guess to flesh that a little more. So I'm not awfully concerned or a part of legends and weapons that are far off in development and prototyping. I do play in playtests and I provide my feedback, and I think it is valued, but not until weapons and stuff and characters are closer to design lock, do I really concern myself too much with that. I spend a lot of my time monitoring the sort of health of the player base. I am looking at our dashboards for all those, hot topics of pick rate, win rate, and all those other things, and we can dive more into that. But in general, balancing is not done by one or two people. Daniel Klein is obviously very vocal dev. He is a lead designer, and he does own the overall legend meta. But we do meet regularly in a bigger group, and sort of delegate tasks out for bigger balancing changes to specific designers. So we all give our feedback, and then it is on someone to sort of take the final action on how to implement that. And similar thing with weapons as well. It's very much a team effort, and there is designer who owns that final sort of weapons meta and weapons health, but it is very much collaborative, and everyone brings their own sort of way of thinking and processes to that.
Definitely, and I guess you sort of said this, but like, how could you go a little bit more in depth on how you guys work with like the legend and like gun design teams? If there is anything more to even say about that.
Yeah, I don't know if there's much more to say. I mean, there are separate meetings for looking in the future for kind of what meta you want to target for certain seasons. Who you want to push a little harder, what gun you want to push a little harder, and then there are separate meetings for just okay, let's look at the data. Let's think about what we're experiencing as players, and what do we need to be concerned about? What do we do a good job with, and um, looking more specifically into day-to-day meta as opposed to like far out in development.
Right. So I think one important thing, like before we go into like more in-depth things, is to talk about like what makes bouncing different for Apex, especially in the context of like a battle royale, because it's obviously a lot different than team versus team games and other like conventional modes that we've had like up until battle royales have gotten popular. So like, what sort of things? What different? I mean, I know you said this is like your first um, time being in this sort of position, right? You said that.
Yeah, I mean, but I do look elsewhere for sort of inspiration on like how Valorant, what they look at for certain balancing metrics and whatnot. The issue and the biggest thing with a BR is that the amount of confounding variables you have is just like so much. It's just exponentially greater than a controlled sort of 6v6 like team shooter. Um, that you can sort of you can get lost in the data. And depending on how nuanced you want to get, like there's so many places you can look to sort of validate something that you already have in your mind, or to like look to disprove something. It doesn't. I guess what I'm getting at is like in a BR, we have to be mindful of not driving decisions completely off of data, but helping it inform us in ways that um, we have like a good intuition about as designers and players.
Yeah, most definitely. So, I mean, we can like start talking about these like sorts of like these types of datas or like these data points. Um, like I guess we should just start talking about like the balancing by pick rate topic because I feel like that's obviously been like a huge thing, and it's I'm sure there's been things that are like misconstrued or like misunderstood. Obviously, because again, Twitter's like not the best place to like talk about that stuff, but um, how do you guys look at pick rate? I guess, and like, and then I'll also ask Hodsic, like, what do you like? What do you like as a coach or like you're just someone who's into Apex? Like, what do you personally get out of pick rate? And if that like in the context of you coaching, obviously, but also just the general game.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. So with Legends, we do look at kind of our big three are pick rate, win rate, and encounter win rate. Um, Pick rate in particular, I think, is most important as far as monitoring outliers. Um, so if we look at something like Octane right now, has a significantly higher pick rate than the rest of the field. Like he's an outlier. Um, and we can talk more about the reasons as to why that may be. But this can become problematic when, as a player who is not Octane, you feel like you are sort of missing out on something. Um, and if you designed a bunch of Octane-like characters, it can very quickly lose what makes Apex so great, in the sense that there are characters that fit with different playstyles and philosophies. Um, so pick rate, yeah, pick rate, win rate, and counter win rate. Pick rate's big, we're not shooting for a game where Octane has the same pick rate as a more like niche cerebral character such as like Crypto. But those outliers, like in a healthy game, should be dialed in a bit. And we can talk more about that. And then in weapons, there's a lot of things we look at that I don't think have been talked about much, but some of those stuff of just big picture stuff is like total damage done for guns. So you can be comparing, an R9 versus a Volt, and then looking at stuff like drop rates as well. How often are people dropping the L-Star versus a 301? Or like percentage of downs, how many of total downs in the game, how many of those downs are by a Spitfire? And then we look at stuff like, range performance and encounter win rate of weapons as well. So there's a lot of stuff we look at for weapons as well. But none of those, and I want to be clear, none of those is our tried and true. This is what we look at for the final say. Like I said, it can help flag things for us or guide discussion, but ultimately we kind of use our intuition as players and as designers in what we think would be the best move forward for the health of the game.
So what you're saying is pick rate is not the only thing that you use to balance. For everyone watching, that is definitely a misconception. There are multiple different variables being accounted for and looked into. So, yeah.
Yeah, the data, and as many people pointed out, the data, it varies across ranked, like MMR, casuals. It all varies across ranked. It varies across when we have takeovers. It varies across competitive. Like there's so many confounding factors that we know that when we're looking at the data, and when we're approaching that, we're very leery of to make sure that we're kind of approaching that with a sound mind. So we're not looking at, pick rate's high, like we need to nerf in this way. It's, believe it or not, it's a little more complex and nuanced than that.
Right.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in on that. I think something that just unfortunately seems to happen every single time something is like communicated is I think most of the community takes like the smallest thing, like that is like somebody will ask a question right on Twitter or Reddit, and then a dev that is responsible for that will respond, and then like the smallest thing is taken completely out of context. Like the whole pick rate and win rate thing, for example. Like if you have a whole balancing team, they're not just looking at stuff like that. I kind of like side with them on this. I think it kind of blows my mind that no, I'm not saying you should only look at pick rate and win rate, but it kind of blows my mind that I feel like Apex is the first game I played that people complained about balancing off statistics. I don't think you should fully just balance off statistics. I'll get to that point, my next point in like a second. But I mean, like every other esport out there, you better believe they're absolutely using heavy statistics to balance everything. I think one really good example that's very public too. Somebody actually mentioned in the chat is Rainbow Six. After a season's done, they'll literally throw in all of the numbers of all of their operators and why they're doing certain changes and exactly what that looks like. Now, I know what a lot of people complain about is, oh, well, if Watson's win rate is really high, it's probably because all the bots are playing her, etc. That is certainly a valid complaint, but I know for a fact that, and anyone that probably has taken a stats course should know that people probably aren't looking at just what are the bots doing. I would imagine, and they have said this, that it is this way, that they look at win rates and pick rates and all that across all levels. Again, not saying it's 100% the way you should do it, because my next point I want to get to is I do think sometimes you just need to balance off the feel of the game. I remember when this game came out, one of the first things I really thought after playing it for a little while was a character like Caustic, for example. Trying to like achieve perfect balance with all the characters is great and whatnot, but a character like Caustic, I personally don't think should ever be like very meta, just for like the health of the game. There are certain things that just shouldn't feel good because it makes everything else feel worse for everyone else. And I think this is just a personal opinion, but I think Caustic kind of fits that bill. If anyone plays, for example, I think the biggest similarity I can draw is like in Dota. If anyone plays Dota, like techies is like the most atrocious thing in my opinion that fucking happens in Dota, and Caustic is like that equivalent to me. It's like, yeah, I know there are people that obviously like to play Caustic. That play style is certainly can be very good, but when you make a character like that too strong, even to a point where he's like a 50% win rate in theory, it's going to feel bad for everybody that encounters him. I think there's some things that are okay with being a little bit weaker. I think there should be some things that are okay that are a little bit stronger if they're more fun for the general health of the game, personally.
Yeah, for sure. I think you made a good point about how like your observation of Caustic and how you think that he shouldn't be like overly meta, because I think that's something another thing we can talk about is that like not every character also even needs to be meta just for the sake of being meta. I think I mean, for like Mirage and Caustic are obviously two completely different characters, but like in that like Mirage is an example, at least to me, where that is a character where I don't think like he doesn't need to be meta, and I don't think anyone should like really ask for him to be a meta. Like if he was, I mean, we're obviously talking about the context of competitive. If he was, that's great, but like it's also okay to have characters. Like in my opinion, you guys can comment on this afterwards, but in my opinion, it's totally okay to have characters that are like good for pubs or ranked and not good for comp. And that's totally fine as long as there's like options and diversity in comp for like from my perspective, it's fine. But how do you guys feel about that?
I agree. I think on the Mirage note, I think that's good to bring up. In a game where we focus on, or we're aware of, combat readability, and Mirage's entire kit revolves around muddying combat readability. I would be terrified of a Mirage meta, and Mirage is a character that I think absolutely appeals to a certain audience, and they love him passionately, and he's got a healthy enough pick rate where it's like he's good. We're happy with where he's at right now, and don't feel the need right now to push him one way or another. So,
any thoughts on that, Hodsic, or just like the idea, or like any more on that idea of like not every character needs to be meta?
No, 100%. Like I said, Caustic, I think, is a prime example of that. Do I think the character should be really weak? No, definitely not. But I think what was like literally last season when Caustic was meta. I'm not even talking competitively. Anytime I make any kind of like opinion, I understand that this game at its core needs like the casual player base to survive at like every game. So if I ever say anything, it's not like competitive balancing is something that's like tertiary when it comes to like things I'm talking about. I think Caustic, just for the health of the game, like I said, that's a character that shouldn't be meta. I think that could just be my own like personal bias, but I'm trying to kind of like even look outside that. Again, I don't think he should be weak. I just don't think he should ever be like too strong. It's kind of how I feel about like everyone always asks, man, they keep nerfing Wraith. Wraith is too strong. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me to prove how strong Wraith is, but I mean, Wraith, Pathfinder, all these types of characters are really, really fun, which is why people like to play them. And I think their skill set is what just makes them more fun than the characters that have like Rampart, for example. Like they're naturally going to be picks that people, because they're just really fun to play. I don't think they're nerfing them just because everyone's picking them like crazy. They're certainly strong characters, but I've always been in the mindset that they should be very cautious on how they nerf the very fun things in the game, because like I said, I'm sure as a balancer, like achieving that full 50-50, like everybody has a 50% win rate type deal is probably ideal in their minds, but I think in practice you gotta let the fun stuff feel fun, and at the same time not making the game feel frustrating.
Yeah, that is ideal for sure. I think I don't know how. I mean, I think Respawn. Correct me if I'm wrong. Respawn is looking into an Octane nerf. I was gonna bring him up in that regard because I think Octane is a character, at least fundamentally, that is fun and also not really frustrating to play. Like, you could definitely argue that he has elements of like anti-fun, but at least from my perspective, he's really not like that anti-fun to play against, and he's fun. So I think that's like a really good model for a character in that regard. And obviously, like some people will play are playing him in competitive, so it seems that like he does have some strength and viability even in comp.
Yeah, and I actually see this text comment in chat that's jumping out at me. Don't nerf utility-based legends.
Everything's
So I
utility,
think, I
isn't it?
mean,
I'm
well,
just checking.
yes and no, but
Right.
like Octane, I mean, my whole thinking on Octane when we were first playtesting the jump pad changes was like, oh shit, this is a big change.
Yeah.
Like this could actually be like a rotational tool that the whole freaking team can use instead of like a skeet shooting simulator. Um, and so when and so that's really cool to see. Like if you told me that we live in a world where we see like Octane Bloodhound Gibby back in season 2, like comp meta, like what? Okay, and so I don't want to shy away from that. And when we're thinking about what to nerf there to take away to bring that down that astronomical win rate, or not win rate, but pick rate a little bit. Uh, you know, I I would advocate against touching the jump pad. But I do also think there's something very viscerally pleasing as an Octane player to just be stabbing yourself with your stim. I've seen proposals as well of like, well, what if you stim for as long as you hold the stim? Like you lose that much, like you lose X amount of health for X amount of seconds that you're holding the stim. And we brought that up and we were talking about that in one meeting. We're like, oh, that's cool. And someone's like, but like I'm Octane, I need to just get my, like, it feels viscerally good to just press that button every time I stim. So in sort of staying true to the character there, like we still want to give him that ability to get that instant sort of faster from the stim, but potentially make it a little more thoughtful into like when you should stim. Because right now in its current tuning, I think if you're not stimming, like what are you doing as an Octane? Um, and losing that sort of axes of decision making, I don't think is ultimately a good thing in the long run. But I'm not going to talk too much specifically on what we're going to do to any future legends, but um, we know Octane's fun, and we do want to channel that in our balancing changes. We don't want to absolutely destroy that. Back in Pathfinder when his grapple was slaughtered to 35 seconds, like yeah, that was a travesty that we knew.
It was a dark time.
Yeah, it was a dark time. That was before I was working here. But I have an idea that the designers were thinking, we'll eventually bring this back somewhere as we sort it out. But it is what it is.
Definitely. I actually want to talk about so I guess the reasoning or the philosophy behind nerfing Octane. So he has like a really insane win rate and pick rate. Actually, I don't know about his win rate. Sorry, his pick rate is insane. Some people might argue or like tell you that or like ask why nerf Octane and why not nerf or like why not buff other characters. Like what sort of like response do you have?
Well, I guess so. So there, like the issue. I think you could easily fall into a sort of ability creep trap where, in what world, what would Watson have to look like to be as fun to play as Octane without being completely broken from like an abilities perspective? Like I don't know the answer to that, and I'm scared of what that would look like. So the short and sweet answer is it would just be ability creep. When we talk about ability legends, if you want to buff everyone to the level of like a viscerally fun character, I think the end result would not look like Apex.
Yeah, I actually wanted to touch on that because I used to be in that mindset heavily, but I also was also in that mindset when like things were definitely not as strong as they used to or as they are now. I'm absolutely like in the mindset of like, hey, here's a really fun character. rather than nerfing that character and making that character feel worse for everybody to play. Let's let's bring everybody else up to their speed, which I think Apex has done over the course of its existence, has done enough of that to the point. I mean, if you think Gibraltar used to be an absolute meme pick in the beginning of the game, now he's one of the best characters in the game. Same with Bloodhound. So I think they have been doing that, but I think it did actually, like last season or like a season, like last 2 seasons, it did get to that point where everything did get balanced or everything got buffed too much, and we saw Gibraltar was literally a better lifeline. His kit was insanely overloaded because people wanted a character like Gibraltar to get brought up to Wraith's level, and he absolutely was. If anything, he's probably a better character to play than Wraith. And now I think when you get to that point, I think that's what got us kind of into Ability Legends for a little bit, which I think is fine, because right now I feel like the nerfs to Gibraltar and Caustic, for example, I think were very good. Now that character doesn't feel like like Gibraltar doesn't just feel like a free get out of jail card like he used to. As you know that if you beamed a Gibraltar team on their rotation, if you didn't kill that Gibraltar, they're basically going to get back to full health and then just continue rotating like nothing ever happened. They can obviously still do that, but to a much lesser degree. Caustic as well, I think, like, even though he's still kind of annoying to play against, I still think Caustic is strong, but he's just like, you have to actually know how to play him now. Same with Gibraltar. I think these changes are going to weed out the lesser Gibraltar and like Caustic players in general. I think the most recent nerfs, that is. I don't think they gutted the characters. I think it's just tuning it down from like straight ability legends to actually, hey, you have to know how to actually use your abilities now, not just randomly press a button.
Yeah, I think that's actually really important. Sorry to cut you off, but I think just really quick, like characters having like themes is really important. Like you can talk about this more, Jaybiebs, because you're more involved in this. But like from my perspective, characters having like defined themes is really important, because Caustic, at least from my perspective, before this last nerf, he had 2 themes in that he could play offensively, like at an extremely well level, and also defensively. And that's what felt oppressive to me, that I could get like pushed just super hard by Caustic, and it felt bad.
Mm-hmm.
But now you can't really get pushed by Caustic. It's not the same, and it's nowhere near as impactful. Like he has a consistent theme in that he is that like a bunkering defensive legend, and he denies teams from pushing him. And I think he's like in a better place and in a better state because of that, like that consistent theme.
Right. Nothing felt worse, I think, and I'm sure most players and pros that agree with me. Like you get into a tough rotate, you get into like a little bit of a pinch. You found like a little bit of safe cover, and then just a random Caustic team farts on you with his ult from like 20 meters away, and then you're just dead because he just threw his ult at your rock, and then you have nowhere to go. Now, obviously, it takes, I think, 20 seconds to pretty much kill you, so you can actually sit there and heal it or heal through it. So I think that was a very healthy change. I liked the ability to push offensively with Caustic, but that was just way too overbearing and way too strong. If you literally got 1 tick of gas on somebody, that slow alone would be enough to usually just that impactfulness of the gas would usually be enough to just pretty much kill that team.
Another note too, because with Caustic, like there was a significant change, obviously, and took a lot of power out of the ult, in particular with the cooldown and the damage change. But for Caustic mains out there, like it's not like we were like we see his pick rate go, or his win rate go down a bit, and we're like, okay, like job's done, game's balanced, let's move on. Like it's we're always iterating, and we're always learning and growing from that. So, will Caustic stay at this power level for eternity? Like, no, inevitably no. I'm sure there's some follow-up tuning that will happen, but certain things, will take precedent over another when it comes to what we want to prioritize for like pushing the meta in one direction or another.
Yeah, most definitely. I want to talk about, I guess, this is sort of in the context of like Caustic and other like characters that are like considered like ability legends, but like this whole idea of like counters. I guess I'm wondering like how much of that is in the discussion when you guys are talking about life balancing, if at all. I mean, obviously there are elements of counters in this game, right? Like Watson Gen, and then like crypto EMP and things like that. I'm just like wondering how do you guys like think about counters?
Yeah, we never strive to sort of push like a direct counter in one way or another. Ultimately, because as well, when someone proposes that as like a nerf or a buff, it would do nothing. It wouldn't move the needle significantly when we're looking at data. When we're looking at comp, on the other hand, I'm still personally in the camp that just because there's a crypto or two in the lobby, Watson becomes completely irrelevant. I know EU has, cryptos has a much higher pick rate, but like in NA and last LGS, I think there was one or maybe two cryptos, and I have a hard time thinking that I don't buy the argument that crypto hard counter Watson is irrelevant. Like I think there's other things at play there that make Watson
I agree
less
for
than
the record.
ideal. Okay, but yeah, we can talk more about that. Like it bothers me a bit when people try to simplify it just and get into this echo chamber of crypto hard counters Watson. She's useless now. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk about that. You go off, Hodsic.
Yeah, no, I want to challenge that, like hard challenge that. Like, yes, does crypto do his abilities on paper counter Watson? Absolutely. One EMP knocks everything out, for sure. But I don't think that you're not seeing Watson because crypto is decent. I think the overall just game like landscape has changed drastically in terms of playstyle. Like people played Watson, Path, and Wraith because it was a consistent point gathering or point gaining comp in tournaments. But I think there are so many things and so many different viable playstyles now that can easily yield you more. What's it called? More consistency than Wraith Path Watson. Wraith Path Watson almost feels like a gamble now compared to what the reason why we used to pick it. Now, with characters that are strong, like Bloodhound and Gibraltar, for example, are really, really big fighting characters, but they also give you a lot of like resetability or kind of a get out of jail, not necessarily free card, but Gibraltar, for example, absolutely can mitigate a lot of like BS you kind of run into in a comp game. And I think it's just more that other playstyles got buffed much heavier, and then to the point where position-based playstyles just aren't as consistent as they used to be. A lot of that, some of that, sure, can be taken into account. The fact that Watson definitely got nerfed. She doesn't feel as good to play, but I don't subscribe to that like narrative that crypto is strong, so Watson's useless. I don't. I think there's just so many more factors to it than that.
Yeah, and so that like that idea we're saying there of just like playing edge has become much more viable, and the fact that there's you can outcraft batteries, zones may be more like less predictable. All of these things in conjunction with crypto interaction, um, those all have an effect. What I think and what I have seen in chat with like some frustrations about fence placement and stuff, that's the stuff that I think as designers we're more intrigued about dialing in, both for like crypto as well, and just as a user, there's areas of the kit that are just clunky to use or not as streamlined as a Bloodhound scan where you scan and you get all that information. Crypto drone management, I think, could be improved in a lot of areas and will not only increase viability in comp but also across the board. Watson and crypto have very low pick rates, and I think if you remove some of that entry cost in learning how to play the character effectively, like that would be a really effective buff across the board, in a way that we think would be healthy for the game. Another thing, just as a side note on Watson, that I want to clarify, and probably more on Daniel's behalf, because he's mentioned, Watson has a high pick rate, or Watson has a very high win rate at high level play. High level play is used very loosely in that context, I think. He was probably referring to Diamond Plus, maybe Plat Plus level play. When I know as competitors, when you guys are talking about high level play, you're talking about tournaments, ALGS, maybe just ALGS finals in particular. And that game is a much different game than a plat lobby or a diamond lobby, as well as Watson excelling in endgame and therefore winning more. So yeah, I mean it's I guess I wanted to sort of bail him out a bit there, and like high level play means different things to different people. So like we're mindful of that as well. We watch the tournaments. I don't see Watson used. There's probably a good reason she's not being used. Like I keep that in mind and I bring that up in our balance discussions.
Yeah. Well, I think actually, I'm going to go on to another topic in a second, but before that, I think one of the reasons why Watson also kind of feels bad is because, well, Hodsic talked about this, but she's like, when all the Gibby teams are coming from Edge and they're like giga looted and they have all their bats and everything, like Watson doesn't really have much like combat utility or combat effectiveness. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing that she doesn't, but it's hard to deal with those Gibby teams when you are Watson in comparison to, let's say, a character like Caustic, So if you're early rotating and you're in a spot, but you're not going to have the meds to sustain yourself to like make a lot of presence, or like you don't have the loot to like match up against these looted Gibby teams, Caustic mitigates some of that problem, right? And I think that's part of the reason. That's a large part of the reason why Watson feels bad. There are obviously like so, and then also the crypto thing. Like it is true. Like when you even if there are cryptos in the lobby, you're not getting like EMP'd off cooldown
Unless tech is in your lobby.
Yeah, exactly. Except for that guy. But like even for EU, right? Like actually, the majority of crypto teams are not like center of the map early rotating. They're actually on Edge. There's like two or three early rotate crypto teams. So like realistically, even if you're playing Watson, you might not even run into like a crypto team if you're early rotating. And I think like Cooler did show that one of the games. I forget if it was Winter Circuit 1 or 2. I still do think she's weak, and but yeah. I had another thing to say. I guess another thing is people also. I think there's a psychology behind Watson is in that people want her to be meta because she was like, I don't know, she was easy to play. Maybe I'm wrong about that one, but like she was like really streamlined and easy, and it reminded people of the good old days or whatever. Like I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that one, but like that's what it feels like a little bit. You know what I mean?
People definitely idolize. Don't get me wrong. The Wraith Path Watson meta was like competitively was definitely my favorite too. As a competitor, but it definitely felt like that's like where you needed to actually know how to use your characters. Outside of Watson, you could kind of stick anybody on Watson. They just had to put the gen up. But that's the one that kind of felt like you really had to have the most BR game sense and understand how to play the game to really get points and win. I mean, we saw a lot of very consistent team placings when that was the meta. Now it's kind of like tournaments are, almost anyone can win, which there's multiple factors. I'm not just attributing the lack of that meta to that. But yeah, I kind of agree with you. I do think there's a little bit of people like holding on to like those like glory day type feel. I think the game for the most part feels way better now than like overall than it did back then.
It's more fun to watch, at least for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, definitely. I know most viewers hated the Wraith Path Watson. And it's exciting when you see a team pick out like a nuke. All of a sudden you see them like running a Bangalore, for example. That's exciting for people to see. And then like you start thinking about like why the heck are they running that?
Yeah, why the heck are they running that, Hodsic?
Dude, it's literally just because Flanker's good at it. I mean, there are some reasons, but like we have like without getting too much into but we had like 5 comps that we change depending on what the situation is. But yeah, I do think people kind of like idolize that meta a little bit, even though I feel like that playstyle was definitely a little bit restricting. I think now you see teams just a little bit. Teams are now kind of coming into their own in terms of like what they can, or like their own identity, so to speak. Now, I would like to see maybe like the edge playstyle get like a little bit like nerf, but at this point, I'm not sure how to even do that because there are a lot of characters that are super strong at it. Like Jaybiebs said, crafting is a big thing. You know, you could just who cares about rotating the zone when you could just leave this POI with 10 bats total and not have to worry about zone and just fight your way in. It's certainly difficult. I do think Watson needs some love, though. All that being said, personally.
Definitely. And going off that, so like obviously there's not this like super specific binary of like playing early or like early rotating or playing zone and then like playing edge. Like it's really based on like your proximity to the zone. But like, is that something that like Respawn talks about or like is in the conversations of like balancing? I mean, I know that you guys aren't solely balancing off comp, and it shouldn't be that way. But like, is that ever brought up? This like this whole like early rotate edge thing, and like, can we make how do we make both viable?
Um, Not specifically, and that's that question involves a lot of parties too, and I think I do my due diligence in sort of providing feedback for anyone ranging from the map designers to people that are handling loot tables to CGE guys to legends to weapons. Because I think all those things and crafting, I think all those things have an effect on effectiveness of different play styles. Um, but as far as like day-to-day concern with other designers about like different sort of high-level play philosophies in comp, I don't think they're terribly concerned. I think they're mostly focusing on just designing good characters that can fill roles that don't exist on the Apex roster.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, yeah, and I will say I think that is maybe part of the frustration from people like or like for people who are really like fixated on like that early rotate playstyle. It does seem like a bit inflexible right now, like that there aren't like really options for it. um but otherwise, yeah, do you have any other thoughts on that, Hodsic?
Uh, I feel like it's probably if I had to guess, I'm sure they're probably not like sitting there, probably thinking like, how do we prioritize one or the other? I think a positional based like gameplay is something you're only going to see extremely like high level players. I have to say extremely if we're referring to high level players as like plat plus. I'm talking like pred to like pro. I don't think outside of that you're going to see too many people actually playing. I think most people in Apex, they hear shots, they push them. You know, I don't think you'll. I'm not sure it's a discussion worth having because unless you're balancing for the top end, then that's a whole different story. But I think for the general game, I don't think most people are usually going for that kind of play style, regardless, because it's a little bit more passive. It's probably a little bit more boring for most people.
Right. And going off that, let's talk about this whole thing about like some people want the game or some people want like the competitive to be played on a different patch. And I know that's actually a topic that's been brought up in like a multitude of games in esports. But I actually I used to be in that camp, but now that I remember talking to someone and they brought up the point that like even new players need to be playing like the same game as the pros so that there's some sort of like affinity or connection or like they can relate to it and understand it. But I want to hear you guys' thoughts on that whole thing about balancing like a different patch for competitive.
You mean with like different different loot tables, or like the fact that the gold knockdown is disabled or stuff like that?
Um, Even I guess more so like well, yeah, that and also like legends, for example, like some
Like they're
people,
balanced differently
yeah,
between
just
competitive and
straight up, some people have suggested that. So I want to hear what you think about that. Like, let's say, like Watson was just like, uh, I don't know, like, super OP and or like buffed in comp, for example, or whatever, or like Gibby was nerfed in comp or something like that. I don't know. Just yeah,
yeah. I think that opens up a can of worms that is not worth the payoff. I think the biggest concern is kind of what you mentioned of in any great sport or esport, the fact that you can relate to the game that's being played, like they're playing by the same sort of rule set with the same sort of tools at their disposal. That really helps um, for how much you enjoy that as a spectator. Um, and unless something is terribly broken, I think it would be more of an indicator of just poor design overall if something was terribly broken at high level play and underwhelming at a different skill level. Like that, at that point, you just look at the drawing board and say, okay, we need to rework this altogether. So I think that should be like an absolute last ditch resort if if that was to be considered.
Yeah. I think in an ideal world, like the competitor in me is like, absolutely, let's balance the game like two separate ways and just make it, enjoyable for the pro players and for the casual scene. But I think even though Apex is already trying, like I know a lot of their philosophy is to keep the game pretty consistent, obviously, from the casual game and the esports side. There are still actually a lot of people. I mean, I get a lot of questions all the time about people like not understanding the way the game works competitively, like in terms of uh like uh, like loot or even like the score system, like stuff like that. There's still a lot of like disconnect there, despite how easy or despite how much work is kind of already put in there. I think for the game, I kind of agree with you. Even it's not. I don't think it's ideal. I think you need that. Like as much as I would love to have like ranked, especially emulate comp, it's such a tricky balance. I know a lot of people are saying, for example, they want like the ALGS point system in ranked, and I would love for ranked to be the exact same as comp, but I feel like that would already make ranked, at least like playstyle wise, like everyone complains about third parties and people holding W, etc. I feel like that would make it feel even worse because the ALGS point system, there's no the kills are uncapped, you know. So I think that's the ideal world, but I think in a battle royale that's so hard to achieve without making it feel bad in certain areas.
Yeah, definitely. And in the same conversation, so a lot of people also would argue that um changing these things won't affect like pub and ranked players. So like outside of like relating to comp, like there's also that discussion. Like for example, um if they buffed refinery or whatever, like I don't know, like how what is respawn, or like what do you think about that whole argument?
Um, well, I think in regards to like specific areas that prove to be just problematic for as a landing zone and for rotations, you can see trends throughout most levels of play when um, an area doesn't feel good to land at or rotate out of. And I think map designers definitely target problematic areas from what they see in their experience and then what they see in feedback when thinking about what areas to change. I think the latest World's Edge update, big shout out to Alex Grainer. That guy, big gamer, big FPS geek, and it shows through his map design with sort of his thought processes and how he revamps staging and countdown areas. Um, and so, like, I personally love what he's done for the map updates, but across the board, uh, the maps are also in a live game very fluid, and level designers are constantly looking to improve upon that. Um, KC, we can talk about KC. I'm not a map designer, so like can't go too deep into that. I could talk about loot, but like um, it's ever changing, and we as designers would love to see more than just, and I'm sure spectators and players would love to see more than just World's Edge on comp, right? Like it's definitely a goal to get everything the other maps uh, balanced and entertaining for the players and the spectators alike. I mean, there's always going to be pushback from there hasn't been competitive reps on Olympus or Kings Canyon, so people are going to be initially just against the idea. But like any change, there's going to be a learning process to when that happens when we have different maps in the comp rotation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would love to see all the other maps played as well, but I do just want to get like a quick hats off for. I know it's not like your team particularly, but for not forcing us to play Kings Canyon competitively. That is.
Yeah, we definitely had a talk like the start of I guess season 8 of I think we were considering Kings Canyon at the time, and ultimately, yeah, we sort of deferred to the masses there and said, like, we would love to see it. Is it quite there yet? Like, probably not. Let's go with World's Edge again.
Yeah, I think. Sorry to interrupt. I think both. I think Olympus might. I would love to see Olympus in comp. I think it would be really cool. I think like the way a lot of POIs are designed, like with holding like I feel like a lot of them are designed with having like multiple teams holding certain areas in mind, and I think that's pretty healthy for comp. I think you want like a design space where a lot of teams can kind of find like real estate to hold up. But I think realistically, Olympus, I feel like is a really far away from comp, only because of the lack of POIs. And I know there's not going to be a single update that all of a sudden injects like 5 POIs, or at least I would imagine there isn't. But that's just my take on it.
Do you guys have any, like, I don't know if I'm asking for a leak, but like, do you guys have any intentions of like trying to make KC appealing to like comp, like enough to get it into comp?
I mean, to be honest, I've sort of given my feedback to the level designers, but
Right.
I am not talking with them like regularly, day-to-day basis on kind of what they're planning or mapping out. I kind of know what they're working on, and I control what I can in regards to like loot feedback. I know, like when what's it called, Crash Site and lakes in Kings Canyon when those were put in. I remember seeing on streams and playing. I was like, these places are straight juice in loot, and so to verify that, I talked with like our analytics team, and he pulled out in diamonds, like in diamond ranked lobbies, on average, players are leaving these POIs with this much better armor, this much better attachments, this much better, this many more consumables. So we had the sort of quantifiable data to back up, like, okay, we need to dial back these areas. We haven't revisited loot outside of the POIs and like the river towns. Like we can bump that up a bit. And so I think those did go live in the mid-season update. But yeah, I mean that's just an example of like a balancing thing that we were looking at for Kings Canyon. When it comes to map design, yeah, I can't talk too much on what we got coming for that.
So is loot like the map design team? Like I mean, you said you like give your feedback, but like is loot kind of like devoid from the live balancing team? Like, like for each POI?
Yes and no. The level designer sort of owns it as part of the map design, and then but then when you start incorporating stuff like weapons and talking about different weapon classes and ammo types, like there has to be some cross pollination and making sure you have enough ammo type spawning in certain areas, and that's kind of where I'm a part of both those conversations as well. So there's no one guy or one party that's doing that. It's across multiple departments.
Right. Because I asked that because in the context of competitive, like that obviously very much seems like a balancing thing, like loot per PUI. But in the context of like pubs, obviously not so much, right? And sort of in ranked, like it's like, but yeah. So I just wanted to like bring that up because I also don't think that KC is like comp ready, but I also would like to see how that map would play out if people had like really good loot, right? If people had like Olympus level loot, I think people might actually have different opinions on the map, to be honest. I think a large reason why people might not like it is because you don't have enough loot to like fight for certain rotations, and obviously crafter helps, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know until it's actually in the live game for anything. Like,
Right.
back in the day when they were designing Wraith, could they have predicted kidnapping to be what it is today in comp? I doubt they were thinking about kidnapping. Like, some of these things come to light once it's live, and millions of players play it, and high level competitive players quickly min max everything and sort of find the meta that the designers may have not thought of, or it's a byproduct of some part of the design.
What do you think about that? It's like about like what I brought up actually. Like I'm actually I want to hear your opinions on that. Like, do you? I mean, are your complaints on KC like the map design, or do you think it's also like,
Yeah,
or
map
like how
design.
much do you think the loot affects it?
Loot's definitely a big part. I think if we got that most recent locked and loaded, I think if we got that on KC, it would make comp feel better. But the inherent the thing about like KC and Olympus is I think there's inherently a lot that would need to change with the map to make it good. KC has a ton of POIs, which makes it like pretty like nice. But the problem is almost all of those, like every POI and every portion of the map funnels into like you have like 3 or 4 POIs per section of the map that funnel into the same place, and that makes rotating awful. There's a lot more. There's a lot of chokes people have to go through. The map would need to open up a lot more for it to ever be considered, I think, competitive, and for it to feel good from the competitors themselves. Because I think just the inherent map design just forces too many teams to fight at a time where it doesn't feel very good to fight competitively, at least. And I think that's why. Same thing with like third parties is like almost like you pretty much have like, if we think about the map in just like 4 basic sections, you have probably like 5 teams per section, all making a very similar rotation, and that's just a mess for third parties. That's why I think that's why you see third parties a lot, because if 2 of those teams happen to catch each other early, well, the other like 3 teams that are also coming from like POIs around the area are also going to be coming in. You know, I just think the flow of the map is too closed off in terms of rotating, and makes that's why I think that's a big reason why it makes it feel very uncomfortable, and why it's hard to get a lot of teams alive throughout like the mid game to like late game.
Yeah, that farm area I feel like is especially bad. Like that's like
Yeah.
that's where everyone dies. Like I remember I was working with GSD and we landed capacitor, and like the first week or so we would just like run into like the labs team, the team like landing forest, and then we would run into like the cage team all in like the same place, and then we would just like everyone would just like get third partied and died. So that's a good point. But yeah, I think people definitely want like another map, but I also understand like why there isn't another map right now for sure. But it's good to it was good to like talk about like how much, or like if POIs themselves are like looked at in terms of like balance, because I feel like
Yeah.
that's really important to acknowledge and note. But I guess I have like a few other things to talk about. I don't want to like take up too much of y'all's time because we're just past like the 1 hour mark. So there are a few things that I missed about like data. I actually want to go back to like one of them specifically because it's something I wanted to talk about. But I think so I want to talk about like pick rates and win rates, and also like uh do certain like are certain like personality traits or certain people like drawn to certain legends, and is that like discussed or like talked about when you guys are considering life balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, when I think about crypto, crypto is the most cerebral player in the game, right? There's so much thought that goes into when to go in your drone and how to manage your kit, um, as well as keeping up with your team on routes and whatnot. Much more so than an Octane or um, well, any other character. And when you think of like what draws people to a first-person shooter or Apex in particular, like, I mean, I'm just a brain dead controller player, so like crypto, I like to just shoot my gun at things, and crypto is mostly just a drone. So like, will I ever be a crypto main? Probably not. So like we take that into account, and when we're looking across MMRs and stuff, and maybe just better players are drawn to Wraith, right? Like more mechanically gifted players are drawn to someone like Wraith as opposed to Caustic because of her kit. And so, breaking it down by MMR, I saw, like, you can see the average Wraith player is better than the average Caustic player. But like, what causes this, right? Like, is it how much of it is the kit? How much is the player? So I even have talked to the data team about, like, for all Wraiths in the world, and all Caustics in the world, can we just look at like their accuracy with the R9, the Flatline, the Scout, and the Wingman, and like, our Wraith players more accurate? And like, there's a difference. Like, there was a difference, and I was like, cool, but it's not terribly significant. Not as much as you'd think. I mean, it turns out in a shooter, like, hitboxes first and foremost are the biggest thing, and then followed by like multipliers like low profile and fortified, and then you get more into like the kit itself and and personality traits of different players. But yeah, it's not as much as the population thinks, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
That's actually surprising. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, like, let's be honest. A lot of Wraith players just like turbo feed, right? Like, they just run it down and then
Yeah.
they die when they're like about to use their Q. So I'm not surprised. I mean, I am surprised, but I'm not. So, like, it makes sense, right? But
Yeah, and you know who has like an actually surprising high like win rate and encounter win rate is Mirage. And
I actually
have a
believe
theory.
that, to be honest. I believe that.
I want to hear like your reasoning on that.
I
So have a
mean,
theory.
maybe I'm just dumb, but I actually get bamboozled quite heavily a lot, and enough to, like, the first couple shots that you take are like, there are some good Mirages that have made me like absolutely eat dirt. And I've also even seen like Matt Pickett when he used to run Mirage. Not saying this is good for comp by any means, but there were times he would catch my team off guard. My team being like Liquid, like Nocturnal would literally get bamboozled, and then as he turns to shoot the Mirage clone, that's when a high level Mirage player can easily like take advantage of that situation of you turning your attention to the clone. But I think I feel like he's not bad.
Yeah, I think another sort of facet of that, or my theory, is any sort of like specialized character like this. Like, anyone and their mother plays Wraith, right? I mean, like, she's just a popular character in the game. But when you have a very specialized, someone who's really drawn to one character and just can sort of master the intricacies of their kit, and something like Mirage, like, even before he was buffed with the decoys, like, he still had a pretty high encounter win rate, and I just have a feeling that these sort of specialists very much just have a good sort of game awareness and game sense and sort of mechanical ability just naturally. Um, and now they're just playing because they love the idea of the character so much. And they sort of are married to that. Because I've seen like a weird amount of extremely high kill Mirages, like more so than I would think for like other less popular legends. Like, people just cling on to that identity and they just roll with it, and they'll crank out 20,000 kills Mirage, and they're scary. Yeah, they're terrifying to fight against.
so obviously, I earlier I said that I don't think like Mirage needs to be like super strong or meta, but I will be a little like I will challenge this a little bit. Like, how much of that is a player who is really invested in that character overcoming like a bad kit because they like that character so much, or is that a phenomenon? I guess
Well,
for like
it's
a
hard
low
to
pick rate
verify
character
that.
specifically, I guess.
Yeah. I think. I mean, I think it's like, it's hard to say. If you have a
Right.
cut and dry answer, I'd love to know. But like, that's where we kind of have to make some like infer some things. What I do kind of want to see more of is uh, gaining feedback outside of just data and socials, because like with socials, you're going to have sort of selection bias with people who um, just have social media or are active and sort of outspoken. But the vast majority of players, there's plenty of players who just play the game and have fun on the weekdays for a couple hours, or the weekends, that are just silent. But having their feedback would be very valuable outside of data points, whether that's in the form of in-game surveys or whatever else. Like that'd be really cool and helpful to see more of just understanding like specific frustration points around different characters, more so than just like echo chambers of social media.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
definitely. You go ahead. Go off.
I mean, I wasn't going to offer too much more, but I do think in that vein, from your question, I think when you have to take into account, like obviously like legends like definitely matter, but if you're like a high level Mirage player, you could be good at anything really. At the end of the day, even as much as it's memed, the game still requires very heavily that you're good at like gun skill. And like I said, I think that Mirage is in a really good place in terms of doing what he's supposed to, where it's like he diverts your attention for a little bit, like he gets you to look somewhere else, right? I think he's really good. There's a lot of people I watch when a Mirage ults in ranked, you're kind of like, oh wow, we have a Mirage here, he must be a bot. But at the same time, like I see so many people lost, and they're like, I don't know which one's the real one. I don't think he's necessarily bad. I don't think the character will ever be meta, but I think they're just like Jaybiebs said, there's just a lot of people that they just love the character, that they kind of perfect the kid a little bit.
I'm seeing like chat spam low profile, so I feel like we should.
Yeah,
bring it up.
let's talk about like hitboxes and like all that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, the biggest thing is, believe it or not, in a shooter, hitboxes. If the original Apex designers could go back to day one, they might reconsider at least big differences in hitbox, like with the heavy sort of model.
I think they mentioned that too, actually.
Yeah. I think McCord's brought it up, and Klein's probably brought it up. And so another thing with the hitboxes in general, people, I don't know. I always find these tweets entertaining when people sit in firing range and they shoot every square inch of Wraith's legs, and they're like, unacceptable. But like, if I could see that in like slow motion in a game, like that is more important to me. But like, she's gonna eat more bullets. She's bigger. Doesn't match her models like exactly. Maybe her head's a little too big, but like that change of making a small hitbox a little bigger is much better and much different than making a big hitbox a little smaller. Because visually, if you're shooting the model, in a high speed game, if it looks like you're shooting the model, but you're not with the big characters, that's much different from shooting a small model and you can't see when you're just off, but you're still getting the hit. So like, there's a significant difference there in sort of hitbox changes. Like, yeah, it's not exact for a model. It's a little bloated in spots. That's like the goal of the nerf. If you were seeing a discrepancy in fights, like that's an issue, but I haven't seen that yet. So that aside, back to low profile. Like low profile and fortified suck because they lead to weird cutoff points for damage. Obviously, when we're thinking about weapons, you bring a wingman to a fight against a Gibby, and you're like, oh shit, that doesn't feel good. Bleed through was an attempt to sort of help that with like shotguns, make them a little less takey in those 1v1s. So that's the goal of that, was to reduce some feels bad. We're not fans of it. I don't think it's a cop out by any means. Like, we obviously want to look at the kit first and foremost, but sometimes changes are more involved, and we do need to look at something like low profile or something in the meantime. But like, yeah, we 100% would like to see a world where at least low profile could be removed, and I don't think we're far off from that reality. Knowing how much we can play with like hitboxes and thinking about the similarity between the low model and the medium sized model is much more manageable than the big boys.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that. Like, I'm with you. I think almost everyone probably hates having different damage numbers per guns. But I think low profile is a way worse offender than like fortified. It's like, I don't know what you would like. I've always thought about it. I don't know what you would do to Caustic and Gibraltar short of changing their hitbox. If you took fortified off them, it would probably just gut them because of how much just how big they are. Like I think what Gibraltar's like almost double the size of Wraith. Like I think like Fortified, I think most people just accept as like, like they kind of need it, but low profile, I was very in favor of seeing, at least I think I saw on Reddit that it's being nuked. So I'm a fan. I think most people probably are.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, actually, I want to talk really quick about like I just want to make a comment on like the whole like Wraith thing and like hitboxes because there's actually a misconception. There's like just misconceptions about hitboxes right now. So from what I understand, Wraith there are like small, medium, and then like large hitboxes, and then like there's like I think Pathfinder has like a custom hitbox, and Wraith used to have a custom hitbox, right? But now Wraith is like a medium-sized character.
Yeah, I mean, I can provide some clarity on that, but every character actually has a different hitbox. But there's three sort of base models that you go off of. So
Right.
the light class is Watson and Lifeline now. The medium class is pretty much everyone else, and then the heavy class is Rev, Caustic, and Gibraltar. Path lives in a middle zone. It's leaning more towards large now, like it's pretty large, and Wraith is in the low to mid zone, but leaning more towards mid. So there's no cut and dry. Like they're all custom, and since the changes, like it's become even more sort of fluid.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. What was the last thing I was gonna ask? Oh yeah, I was gonna ask one more thing, and that
Actually, I want to talk about this. Why doesn't he have Fortified? Why doesn't he have Fortified?
Oh yeah, let's do that.
No, please.
well, let's touch on it. Like this. So this is some of the stuff we have to think about as designers. Like, looking at the metrics. Rev is weak. Rev tanks bullets. But I have a hard time thinking if we came out with a patch that said, "Hey, by the way, Rev has Fortified," and just tried to sneak that in. I have an idea. I have a feeling that would not go over well with the masses and would be a sort of ignorant change. So if there is a world where Rev gets Fortified, I think that should come at a time where there's an effort to relieve frustration elsewhere.
So
that's
an example of a character. Like it sucks because actually, like I love the idea of Revenant. I think his initial when he first came out, obviously he was very weak. I loved like just playing around with him, trying to like see how you can work. And like I feel like before you definitely needed to like kind of have a brain with Revenant. Now obviously he's just like the source of a lot of people's frustration. But yeah, that's definitely kind of like ties back, I think, to what we were talking about earlier. That's a character that like I'm sure you guys would love to give him some love, but it's that like fine balance. I'm guessing it's like that fine balance of like, do we want to piss off everyone at the same time?
Yeah, and what's tricky with Rev too, unlike a lot of abilities like the ultimate, the team that is capitalizing on a misplay of the ult is oftentimes rarely the team that actually is on the receiving end of the ult, right? Like if Rev misplayed his ult, it's probably there's probably a team camping his totem. And so the team that gets griefed from Revtane landing on them, even when they can fend that off, they don't get the follow-up reward of like being able to capitalize on that. So, like that I think that's the root of a lot of the frustration. In like you just feel powerless in a lot of cases of capitalizing on a poor Rev play.
Well, I think the whole Revenant thing is actually quite interesting because so you have people who say that Revenant needs Fortified, right? But then there are also people who are advocating for Revenant getting nerfed in like putting like a range limit on his ult or making it so he can't take abilities. So I think it's really interesting to see that there are like different camps of thought regarding characters, even in competitive. Like these are competitive players that are saying both of these two different things. So it like like balance is clearly like evidently not as straightforward and simple as like some people might make it seem, like especially pro players, because like how could a character be bad and good at the same time, right? I personally don't think that Hitbox is Revenant's issue. I think Revenant lacks like self-sufficiency. I think he's like overly reliant on like synergy, which is not like necessarily a bad thing, but I would like him to be like a little bit more of like an assassin. But yeah,
I feel like I feel like his passive honestly could like I wouldn't like if I probably had my way with it. Obviously I don't have like numbers and whatnot, but if I had my way with it, I'd probably like take some power away from his ult and probably get some love to his passive. I think the crouch thing is pretty cool, but even since like the dawn of Revenant, I understand kind of why they like made his like the climb like kind of get really once you go past like the standard climb height, it gets a lot slower. I understand why they did that. Obviously, I'm sure they don't want people all of a sudden to be like fighting, and then they all of a sudden a Revenant that was on the ground is all of a sudden like above them on a building. Just he climbed up, he scaled the whole thing. But I think like kind of giving his, I feel like buffing that a little bit might not be a bad idea, assuming we could assuming there's enough sound to like when he's climbing a wall, for example. I think like that would have to be a very important thing, but. Like I would love to see some power taken away from his ult and then it's like kind of given elsewhere. But like at the same time, you can't buff. I feel like you can't buff his silence because I think his silence is already insanely strong. So it's like, what do you do there?
I think his silence is actually strong. I'm on the opposite side. Like I think his ult is like pretty preventable, or like I think there are ways to like deal with it. But the silence, once you get silence, there's just nothing you can do. Like you're just kind of screwed. But
yeah. I think you were gonna say the silence is weak. I was like,
no, I think the silence is insane. Like the silence is absolutely nuts. But I don't know how to deal with that character, or like I don't know how to change that character for the better. Like I personally have no clue. But Revenant is especially interesting because it's like, is he OP or is he weak? Like it is so many people are split.
In my opinion, he's not a game winning character. He's a game griefing character. Like. He could like, the way we see most Revtains or just Revenant in general being used is people use the totem, they do a push, they're not successful with the push in terms of killing the team with the totem, but it's enough like trouble stirring and causing that another team comes and kind of like they're like, oh, these guys are getting Revenant totemed, they're like let's push these guys and pinch them and kill them. So I think he's more of like a kill point play. I don't think he's very like. I don't think his skill set is very good at actually winning the game, or at least not the way a lot of people use him.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason, like, I tweeted out that his win rate was, like, literally the worst in the game.
Yeah.
In endgame, he's just a fridge. It's useless. But, I mean, he has silence, but yeah.
Right. I guess one more thing about hitboxes, Horizon and Path. Let's just squeeze that one in real quick. So a lot of people will argue that, there's no reason why Path has the hitbox he has if Horizon like does his job better. I want to hear what you think. What you both think about that?
Yeah, I mean, we initially talked about doing a sort of patch on Horizon where you're give her a low profile temporarily, but
please no.
No, and that's kind of ultimately is like, well, no, she's fine. She's going to be strong for a couple seasons. That's okay. She's fun to play. People still have a tolerance against fighting Horizons for the most part. But let's target the actual like problem areas of her kit first, and then we can assess stuff like hitbox and whatnot. So that's a case of like, let's look at the kit and then go to hitboxes if we have to, if it's still like egregious.
Yeah, I think Horizon certainly has fixable things from her kit, but what I love about Horizon is I think she was like the first actually useful character on release since like Watson. And I kind of wish like more legends would follow that a little bit. Like I would personally prefer a new legend to be released to be slightly too strong than like slightly too weak. Because the second people realize that a character is like slightly too weak, they're gonna vanish from being picked ever. So I love the fact that Horizon was definitely strong out of the gate. I think her kit's fixable. I feel like my biggest problem areas with Horizon are, my biggest issue with Horizon is when people take the lift. Like, yeah, you have a sound of obviously and on the ground, and that makes a sound, but that lift lasts for, I don't know, like 10, 15 seconds. And then anybody like, say like five, like if you see a Horizon lift go get down or get put down, most people will see that and they'll look at it for like about 3 to 4 seconds to see, who's coming up it. they don't see anyone coming up it, they might turn their attention to something in the fight that might need more attention, like another character wide swinging on them. But then all of a sudden you have like a freaking Gibraltar taking it like 10 seconds in, and he's all of a sudden just spitfiring you from the heavens, and you never heard that. Like, to me, that's probably one of the biggest and most frustrating things about playing against Horizon is no audio cue for when people enter the lift. There's obviously other issues with the lift as well. It's definitely a very strong ability, but that's, for me at least, that's what probably feels the worst.
That's also what probably feels pretty bad about Octane rev pushes too, to be honest. Or at least that's what a lot of people have said.
Yeah, all of a sudden, like, you can... I think there's audio for when an enemy team takes a pad around the pad, but there's no audio like if they're like soaring through the air. All of a sudden, they're just on your roof, and you're kind of like just screwed. I think those like... I know it's not like an easy fix. I know it's not just tweak a bunch of numbers. You got to create like audio for it and whatnot. But I think those things, if that was put in play, I feel like it would definitely hurt Octane a little bit in a good way. To make it feel like it's not as frustrating to play against, and especially Horizon as well. Like I said, the amount of times I've turned my attention away and somebody takes like some like lingering teammate takes that lift like the very last possible second, and I just get beamed because I had no idea he was up there. It was countless.
Yeah, I think all that feedback was taken into consideration when thinking about bouncing Horizon. So
yeah, I'm definitely curious. See what you guys got in store for that. I hope people. I feel I'm scared because I feel like I don't envy your guys' position anytime you have to nerf a fun character. Naturally that's gonna be like everyone loves buffs. Nobody loves nerfs. Especially, I think Horizon is one of the most fun characters in the game, but I think most level-headed people would agree she's a bit too strong.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing is, I talk about this on Twitter all the time. I feel like she's like like the character's just so insane, but like no one's playing her, which in competitive, which is really interesting, other than APAC North. So there's that whole like phenomenon where like a character is like the character can be like super high priority in one region and then like low priority in like other regions, and it's like we're all playing the same game. Why does that happen?
That's actually been I want to inject that's been another sort of not nightmare, but like thinking about the Cossack kerfuffle back when there was going to be a buff and then it was a nerf. And the timing with like the break we took as a team of just like I have EU pros complaining about one thing, NA pros complaining about another thing, APAC complaining about another thing, and so I can't wait till we have Lance back and there's a sort of
Land's the first Land's gonna be something because there's such a huge difference in playstyle from all of the major regions. It'll be interesting. I can't wait.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'm gonna wrap this up pretty shortly. Like one more quick thing, just because we're like almost an hour and a half in. But unless there's something you guys want to talk about, but like this, I want to ask like how much of your job is reactive versus proactive. And so I'm assuming that like you guys have ideas on how a character is gonna, or how a character or a gun is gonna like behave once you like release it to the public, right? But like how much of that is like how much of life balancing is anticipated or reacted?
My job is 80% reactive. Like it's very much monitoring the live health of the game,
Right.
whereas many other the designers and devs are doing development work in future content, future weapons, future legends. So yeah, my stuff is probably 80-20, looking at the live game, and then 20% is when I'm providing that feedback and looking at meta shift stuff down the road. Oh, I see a bunch of stuff in the chat about Spitfire too. So just to address that real quick,
Let's do it.
the data shows it's extremely weak, and I don't know if you guys have played Titanfall 2, but we're going to try to channel that Spitfire energy, and that mag was about 80. I think it was 80 in a mag. So Spitfire is all of our favorite weapons, and we will be doubling its max size.
Yikes. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. For a second, I almost
I feel like I was gonna say that's a
agree.
joke. That's a joke for like the Reddit people that this is gonna get taken out of context and blow up on Twitter.
That too for sure.
Yeah,
That's a complete joke. Like you had me actually the first half. I am not gonna lie. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's going on the front page most definitely. But actually, any leaks? You guys have any plans to nerf that gun? I'm not gonna lie. Personally, I don't actually think it's that broken. I know that is probably controversial, but like I think like
I'm actually with you on that.
I think triple take is worse.
I'm with you too. I find myself personally always picking up a flatline over a Spitfire, but
same.
Spitfire's strong, and we know that
so
as a team. So.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Spitfire, I think, is very strong. But I think it's just one of those things where that gun feels way worse to die to than probably any other gun, because anytime you die to it, you're gonna be like, oh, he just had more bullets than me, right?
Right.
Which certainly could be annoying. Like, it's not. I'm not trying to like dismiss that that's an invalid way to feel. I think that gun is just more frustrating to die to than most guns in the game is all. But I do think it's definitely very strong.
And then to add a little like data tidbit, it is the highest percentage of downs of any weapon in the game right now is the Spitfire. So people are getting exposed to it a lot, and they're dying to it a lot. So
wait, when you
so
say
it's
that,
getting nerfed.
Yeah, is it getting nerfed or what's the deal?
It's not getting Titanfall buffed. We'll say that.
Okay. When you say that though, okay, maybe I misunderstood. You're saying that it has the most percentage of downs, but is that like accounting for how often it's being picked up, or just in general?
Just you're looking total downs in a match.
Right.
What percentage of that, if you break down, is 12% of that by a Spitfire, is 7% of that by a Mastiff. Like, so just looking at that high level, Spitfire is the leader there in percentage of downs.
Cool. Well, otherwise, unless you guys have other things that you want to like bring up or talk about that I probably missed, feel free to. But I think.
Oh, I had a question. I mean, I know you. Obviously, Jay, you got you can't talk about too many like changes coming up. I actually had a question about Gold Bag, and I don't know if you can shed any light on it. Are there any changes coming to like that whole like effect, or like personally, I've always been in like the boat that there should be an audio change on it, but I know that's like a little bit difficult, probably more difficult than visual. But the visual change, I feel like I don't think I've ever noticed it. Ever.
Yeah, I think there's something there. It is a little not as easy to notice as we would have liked, and also, like you said, as opposed to audio, like it does require like line of sight, and it requires you to be within a certain range. So, yeah, I mean we can look at something like audio for sure for that. It also has this stupid thing of like we had the bug where when Mirage had Gold Bag and he would res, it totally defeated the purpose.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, because I've always been like I saw like a lot of big content creators and streamers and pros talking like since the dawn of time, like, oh, make the Gold Bag visual, but I'm just like 9 times out of 10 when you're playing off of the audio of a res happening near you, or you're playing off a res happening near you, you're playing off the audio of it, not the visual. You're not like, oh, that guy, I see that guy getting res, I'm gonna push. At that point, you're already probably shooting them. Like, I personally would be, I think an audible change for the bag would be very good, because at the moment it feels largely pretty much unchanged.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Definitely noted.
I thought of one more thing actually, real quick. So the whole like smaller patches versus like bigger patches thing, like real quick, if you want to like talk about that, like how you guys are navigating that whole thing.
Yeah, and that's a good one to end on, I think too. I do appreciate Respawn's sort of philosophy when it comes to changing something and letting it sit and simmer for a while. Players will generally be very averse and reactionary to kind of bigger changes. And so as long as something isn't immediately visibly broken or terribly underpowered, like I think it's a good thing that you let it sit and you let players learn how to sort of change their play style and think about how they approach different fights and different engagements and different play styles in different ways. So I very much endorse that approach. And I think, but at the same time, on the flip side of that, like if something is obviously too strong, like when the charge rifle was released, like that's kind of part of the reason it brought on a live balance designer, is that someone could act on that quickly and quickly fix that so that you don't have those sort of shenanigans off of a patch.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, both of you. I appreciate it a lot. Like, I think this was a really good discussion. Again, like, it's so hard to communicate, like, online on social media, Reddit, whatever. Like, there's no nuance. There's no like there's no real conversation or discussion that's happening. It's all kind of just like a little bit of like mob mentality. If something, and people can take things out of context. So like even if people disagree about some things, it's nice to hear like nuanced reasoning for how you guys think about like balancing. So I think that's really good. But yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks for hosting this, and Hodsic, thanks for joining as well. Appreciate both your guys'
Absolutely.
thought processes on the game and insights. So yeah, keep it up, you guys, and chat. Always let me know feedback on Twitter and whatnot. Like I'm always lurking on Reddit and everywhere. So thank you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.